G'day YouTube, Baubles on a lot here. Those of you familiar with my channel will no doubt remember that 3 weeks ago the electric speed controller, electronic speed controller, blew up, fried, died, cooked itself, whatever happened. 20 metres from my front gate, made clack, clack, clack sounds as if there was a stick in the back wheel. And it was apparently taking the current the motor would produce under regenerative braking, and the speed control was feeding that back into the motor, so the back wheel was locking up. So here in Australia, a Chinese electric motorcycle with a dead electric speed controller, electronic speed controller. It was a worry. I mean, when I broke the headlight mounting, I laboriously spent 3 days gluing it back together because I didn't know how long it might take on a slow boat from China to get a new one. And I didn't know what the after sales service and support might be like on an electric motorbike made in Hong Kong. So yeah, I did wonders with super glue and araldite and nylon kite string, and then I painted it matte black, and you can barely see it if you don't know that it's there. So I rang up the importer, and it was the Tuesday before Easter, and everything shuts down for Easter. But anyway, I was told disconnect the speed controller from the motor, and if the bike then becomes normally easy to push around, it's definitely the speed controller. If so, pull it out, send it to Sydney. They would put it on the bench and find out what the story was. I asked what a new one would cost because the bike was 1.5 years since I'd bought it, out of warranty, 12-month warranty. Okay, they said it's a $600 unit, but we'll see what happens. Might not have to pay for it. So there was a gleam of hope, and I freighted it off to Sydney on Wednesday, so it left Glen Innes Wednesday, so arrived in Sydney Thursday sometime, and then Sydney shuts down for Easter. So after Easter they got it and they put it on the bench, and I rung them back up again, and yeah, they said it's definitely dead. And that's when things got a bit interesting, because I had been terribly frightened of what the after sales service and support might be like for a bike out of warranty. And I knew it was a bit of a early adopter thing, because there are several functions in the owner's manual where it says not yet available, not yet available, not yet available. So okay, and some companies, they'll sell an early model and they'll have problems, and then they'll fix the problems, and then the people who got the early models are sort of stuck with the problems. But what I was told by the importer was, well, I've actually got 3 other Stings that were made at the same time as my Talaria Sting TL3000 L-1e. And there was another fella apart from me who was going to bring his bike in. So that makes 5 of us. And the other fellows are definitely going to get a free replacement electronic speed controller. So he videoed the test of mine and sent the video to China and talked to them on the phone. Long and the short of it is the factory back in Hong Kong had put 5 brand new ESCs on a priority cargo freight flight to Australia, with another 5 to follow up the next week, because apparently the early model Sting electronic speed controllers had a bit of a problem with one of the components, which was incorrectly potted, which means You stick all the electrics in some kind of a container and then you fill it with polyester resin. Um, and the failure sort of kind of looked under lab investigation forensic conditions to be a water ingress issue. So presumably the black motorcycle radiates heat at night and gets cooled down, and the sun rises and the air becomes relatively warmer than the cold metal, and the warm moist air on the cold metal generates condensation. And in my case, a year and a half after I bought the bike, 4,330 kilometres or 108 hours and 15 minutes into its riding career, yeah, there was enough corrosion in there to just stop it from being a speed controller and turn it into a heatsink with plastic back on it that did nothing. So that arrived back in the mail, express post. All I'd had to pay was the freight cost from here to Sydney. And as well as that, in a rather large box, not only a free speed controller, but also a branded Talaria hat with a plastic stiffener inside so it doesn't get creased or folded in the post. A nice little fabric carry-all with shoulder straps. A Talaria t-shirt that says "Go for it." And it has Talaria on the left-hand collar, sleeve. And not only, but also some brand new brochures of the new range, so that when I come out of a shop and I find there's a small child explaining to grandpa why there's no exhaust pipe, I've got the new brochures to hand out. Being a bit of a thoroughgoing Boy Scout, I've been kind of prepared for such eventualities. I had 3 kinds of these large posters, one for the XXX, of which there was an L-1e version. I don't know whether they make one of them anymore. And there was an MX version, sort of motocross and street legal. There was also a poster for the TL 3000 Sting, and I've got the L-1e version of that. And I had a poster which showed the TL, the L-1e, and the MX. But funny sort of thing, but when you ride a street legal Sting, not many people really want a brochure for the off-road Sting, and I had trouble giving away the brochures for the XXX. So I can't show you the brochure which I used to have, which illustrated the bike that I possess. Because, you know, bearer of good news, yeah, have a pamphlet, have a pamphlet, have a pamphlet. Oh dear, I haven't got any left for myself. So anyway, knowing the figures for this one more or less off by heart, the off-road version, I think it had 6,000 watts available. Mine has 3,000 watts available. The off-road version would do 70 kilometres per hour, might do 75. Mine was, quote, homologated to 45 kilometres an hour. And therein there lies a tale. I regularly, routinely, on a full battery at full throttle, I got 49 kilometres an hour, and it would continue to hold 49 kilometres an hour until it got down around 80% battery capacity remaining. If I held it on full throttle, at the end of a 60 kilometre ride, it would still be doing 43, 42 kilometres an hour with around 23 to 26% of the battery remaining. And I did that several times. When the battery was full, you would achieve 49 kilometres an hour on about 42 watt hours per kilometre. And by the time you'd done 60 kilometres and you're only able to do 42 or 43 kilometres an hour, it was taking 54 or 56, maybe 58 watt hours per kilometre to achieve the lower speed, because as your battery voltage drops, you need more amps coming out of the battery to produce the number of watts to feed the motor to maintain the speed. And the watt hours per kilometre is calculated by the computer based on the amps coming out of the battery. Or so I deduce, just as a funny little man sitting on the hill trying to figure out what the machine is doing. It probably took me about an hour to get the speed controller out when I sent it away. I spent 3 hours swearing at the Tetris game that goes on when you take the new, improved, redesigned, manufactured a different way by a different supplier with the previous defects rectified type Sting L-1e 60 volt 45 kilometre an hour 3000 watt controller, and I'm just really impressed that the factory in China decided it was worthwhile designing and manufacturing a rectified fixed up replacement for people like me who bought an early one. Thank God they didn't say, oh, well, tough tit, we don't do them anymore. That one's a garden ornament. I didn't get stuck with that sort of treatment. They had one available. I would have been prepared to buy it, but they gave it to me for free. I haven't had a deal like that since 30 years ago. I bought an 038 Magnum Steel, brand new, paid $1,250 for it. I didn't use Stihl lubrication oil because I know it's got kerosene in it as a mixing agent, and I didn't like the effect of the mixing agent on the fuel to oil ratio, so I was running it on Penrite pure two-stroke oil, and it had a 1 year warranty, and at the 1.5 year mark, 29 hours in, crack, it broke the crankshaft. And I very trepidatiously went to the Stihl dealer who sold it to me, and he looked at me and he shook his head. He rang up Sydney and he talked for a while, and he came out with a big smile on his dial, and he said, your 038 Magnum Stihl was assembled in Brazil. And as I was recovering from that shock, he said it was assembled out of parts made in Austria, and they were setting up a factory in Brazil because Germany had a chainsaw factory and no forests, and Brazil had lots of forests and no chainsaws. And somebody learning how to use the hydraulic press pushed too hard, putting the bearings on the crankshafts, and that stressed the crankshaft where the bearing goes on. So yeah, yours is broken, quite a few others are broken, and I'm feeling worse and worse as he's telling me all this. And then he said, and the thing is, they don't want anybody saying horrible, bad, sad stories about Stihls, especially not the new range that are, assembled in Brazil. So Sydney's authorised me to offer you an $800 free rebuild. 30 years ago at 29 hours, I suppose 29 years ago, 28 and a half years ago. The point is that saw's done 427 or something hours since they rebuilt it for free. And I thought such old-fashioned guard the reputation of your company type corporate attitudes had disappeared, but no. This mob, Talaria, building electric motorbikes in Hong Kong, they don't want people saying bad, sad, miserable stories about owning the Sting, even if it breaks down. Yeah, if it's within the warranty, and even if it's out of warranty, but it was a problem that they know they had with that vintage, they fixed it for me. I don't know, but I presume they'll treat other people the same. I know all 5 people who had problems when I rang up, and I was one of those 5, we've all been issued with a new speed controller, and the factory sent another 5 out. Now here we move into the anecdote end of the story. I said to the importer over the phone, off the cuff, spontaneous reactionary comment, well shit, if Uncle Spam thinks he's going to win a trade war with 182 different countries around the world, Harley of the Davidson clan's going to have to up his game on sales, on after sales service. And the bloke at the other end laughed and told me a story about Harley Davidson and their electric motorbikes. And yeah, the fella who sold me my motorbike, he's got a warehouse full of spare parts and he can get stuff from China at the drop of a hat. And he was apologising to me that he hadn't got my speed controller tested over the Easter weekend because he was in Canberra demonstrating the replacement Sting, the Sting Pro TL5500, 72 volt DC instead of 60 volt DC, 40 amp hours instead of 38. So peak power is 13.4 kilowatt, but you can only access 5,500 of it. So yeah, I wish I could afford the L-1e version of it, which would be great for towing a trailer. And it's also pretty good for having a laugh at. I don't know who it was who put the wing mirrors upside down on the wrong sides of the handlebars, but if you fix that, and yeah, this one's got a peak power of 8.5 kilowatts and a nominal power of 5,500, and it only does 45 kilometres an hour. The off-road version, it sees 95 kilometres an hour. So my guess is that if the Federal Police Sniper Unit is buying Sting Pros, they're probably going to have somebody talk to the speed controller so they'll be able to do the 95, or maybe they'll just get upgraded headlights and blinker lights and wing mirrors and put it on that one. I don't know. I'm just a silly consumer. The Sting R 4,000 watt off-road bike, which was in production when mine was in the pamphlet, and the Talaria XXX. It's only an off-road vehicle at the moment. 2,500 watt nominal power, 6,000 watt peak power. And it'll do 75 kilometres an hour off-road. And the only reason I haven't taken you for a ride on the bike today or yesterday or the day before is because we've been having between 1 and 2.5 millimetres of rain, drizzle, and then at odd, unpredictable intervals, spontaneously, and it's apparently going to happen for another couple of days. So I decided, bugger it, I will go and tell the what happened afterwards story in the front yard without riding the bike. So to the test ride that I put in on Friday afternoon, where I did 11 kilometres, as I feared, the new properly redesigned and fixed and properly made speed controller, it doesn't let me do 49 kilometres an hour anymore. The bike will now only do 46 kilometres an hour. So I've lost 6% off my top speed, but can't really fault the manufacturer for supplying an upgraded, fixed, not gonna go wrong speed controller to replace the one that used to let me go illegally fast and died after a year and a half, or 1 year and a half, 13 months of riding. Yeah, not really their fault. They've fine-tuned their production techniques, so now the speed controllers that they are shipping out with that bike exactly meet the specifications of the Motor Traffic Act that says you're not allowed to go more than 45. You don't get an extra 4 kilometres an hour for the fun of it. You only get an extra 1. The other thing, I used to see 30 kilometres an hour in eco mode. I now only see 25. There's also a lot more savage torque from a standing start. If you're a little bit careless and give the throttle a bit of a twist on dirt, it will now spin the back wheel with no trouble, and on bitumen it tries to lift the front wheel. To get it to lift the front wheel on bitumen, I used to have to sort of lean back and, try hard to look like a smart ass. The headlight appears to be shining brighter, but that could be figment of a deranged imaginitis. And the regenerative braking, it used to be a barely noticeable phenomenon where you sort of rolled to a stop about twice as, decelerating twice as much as you would if you were just rolling to a stop on a bicycle. Now, once you get below 90% battery capacity remaining, you roll off the throttle, and yeah, it just about pitches you forward as the regenerative braking is now doing something. So the new speed controller is, on balance, yeah, I'd pay $600 for it, very definitely, if I had to. Yeah, they had a pretty fair idea of what they were doing when they made my motorcycle. The parts on mine are dated 2022. I'm assuming it was assembled in early 2023 because I bought it in October, I think, 2023. No, 2023, yeah. I didn't ride it for 6 months because I was dealing with false teeth issues, and that meant drinking too much, and you can't ride a motorbike on an L plate when you're drunk. So I just wrapped it up in a blue tarpaulin. Once I beat the teeth and stopped drinking, then I started to play on the bike. 13 months trouble-free, but I was getting all sorts of performance out of that first speed controller that I didn't expect, didn't quite understand. And as I think I said in the earlier video on this topic, several times I switched the bike on, waited and did all the correct things. And when I took off, it didn't perform any differently, but the readout on the panel was telling me that I was using a couple of memorable times, over 1,100 watt hours per kilometre. Now, it couldn't possibly have been. You know, there was clearly something strange going on in that speed controller. So I wasn't truly surprised that it died. I'm very grateful that it died only 20 metres from my front gate. It was a very convenient catastrophic failure if you've got to have one. It didn't even set the battery on fire. And the rest of the bike was okay as well. So there you go. Now you know. For the look of it, we'll take the fire brigade hat off. Look at that. It's got an infinitely adjustable metal clasp. And there we go. An early adopter. Test pilot Talaria TL3000 L-1e pilot with his brand name hat and all. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.